Hi guys, this is Megan. Welcome back to my channel. I just filmed a video not too long ago just chatting about some of my, I don't want to necessarily say regrets, but things I would have done a little bit differently for my own wedding. And I felt a little bit scattered when I was recording that video, and I think for me, sometimes talking about my own personal experience can feel a little bit more all over the place versus more streamlined. So I thought I would just kind of pop on first before you actually start watching the things that I would do a little bit differently, and just kind of explain the context of the video going into it. And yeah, so without further ado, today I wanted to talk about things that I wish I did a little bit differently for my own wedding. I got married about almost 3 years ago, a little less than 3 years. And kind of looking back, I wouldn't say there's really big things that I regret that I wish that I did differently, but there's things I may have done a little bit differently. And I think everybody has their own priorities. Everything's a little different for everyone. Some people care about certain things and others don't. So I think, whether or not you're going to regret something is really personal to you. If I were to do it all over again, I probably would have done these things that I'm about to mention. And so the first thing that I think I would have done differently would have been doing a first look. My husband and I were really traditional and wanted to see each other walking down the aisle for the first time. Really, honestly, I think a first look was not something that I considered doing at all. Of course, my photographer, coordinator would have loved for us to do it, as I'm sure if you're in the engagement period right now, your photographer has probably talked to you about it and has suggested considering it. But I was one of those people who was like, hard no, I'm not doing a first look. I don't care if it saves time before the ceremony. And really my reasoning for thinking it would have been smart to do it now wasn't for the timing of things. It wasn't for the sake of the timeline or getting to enjoy the reception more. It was truly just because I think that having that private, intimate moment would have been a lot more special than having that moment in front of, 100 or so people. And I think really that's why I say it comes down to who you are and your personality and who you guys are as a couple. But I would say we're, more private in general and not the people who are going to show their emotion or, whatever that is in public. So I think that doing a first look would be something that I would like to consider. He may not, but I would have liked to reconsider that more and probably do one just to have that more intimate, private time, and, really see full reactions, that sort of thing. The other thing that I feel like I would have done differently is kind of not cut corners on flowers. And if you've seen any of my wedding pictures, you're probably like, what? You cut corners on flowers? Your wedding flowers were unique and different. If you haven't seen any of my wedding pictures, I had a really kind of unique, romantic, but kind of asymmetrical, dark, moody, styled wedding. And so I had this amazing, beautiful hanging installation that hung above our sweetheart table that I absolutely loved. And that was a major focal point. But there were other areas where I kind of cut corners where I reused bridesmaids bouquets as centerpieces. And I think that's great. It is such a budget helper. And I recommend it to couples all the time to reuse their bridesmaids bouquets. But for me, flowers were the thing I cared about the most, that at the amount that I was spending already, I would have just rather go all out and enjoy all of the flowers to the full capacity that I could have, especially because that was really the thing I cared about the most. So that I would say is one of the bigger items that I really would do a little differently if I could. The third thing I think I would do differently requires a little bit of context, I think, and that would be having full set table settings. So when I was getting married, I also was planning my wedding out of town, out of state, and I did not use a full planner. I had a day of coordinator or month of coordinator. But I did all the planning on my own, and I was trying to go as much inclusive for certain things as I could. And I was like, okay, I'll rent the china plates and I'll rent these water goblets. But I didn't really find through rentals, a specific set of flatware that I really, really loved. I didn't find through rental companies a very specific set of flatware that I really, really loved. And my caterer provided real flatware and real napkins inclusive in the cost. So I just went along with theirs, but they weren't what I wanted and they weren't like the design look that I wanted. So I opted to have them at the buffet table rather than having them set at the actual tables. And now when I look back at my photos, I still like all the plates and the water goblets that I chose that are in those table setting detail photos with the flowers. But even if it wasn't 100% what I liked and I still wanted to stick with the caterer, I should have just had them set the flatware at the place settings. And I should have just had them, place the white napkins that they had. As I said earlier, my wedding was much more of like a moody kind of style. So I really didn't want any whites incorporated besides my dress at all in the wedding. So with that in mind, I probably should have just gotten my own napkins. I don't usually recommend that. I recommend renting. They will always be 10 times more steamed, better quality, easier to deal with in general. I personally don't think it's really worth doing the linens on your own. I always recommend going with a rental. But yeah, I think I just would, looking back on my photo album, I think I would really have liked if those table settings were completely finished with the flatware and some sort of napkin added to the china plate and water goblet. And the fourth thing I think I would do a little bit differently for my wedding would be the food. And it wasn't that I didn't dislike the food. I actually did like the food that I had, and it was one of the areas where I was less picky about it, and I kind of let my decision be swayed by others' opinions, that sort of thing. But I really wanted to do more of like an interactive kind of stations kind of menu where it was less about the formality or about just fulfilling the fact that it was food and making it more interactive to our and special to our personalities. So for example, I would have loved to have a few different kinds of stations where it showcased our favorite kinds of food. I am a huge fan of Mexican food. If you are one of my close friends, almost every single time we go out to eat, I'm probably gonna suggest Mexican, or at least it's gonna be like in the top 3. And if you suggest Mexican, I'm rarely gonna say no. So I would have loved to have like a Mexican station or like a taco station, something along those lines. My husband loves chicken wings. He actually requested to only eat chicken wings for the wedding. So there was a whole order set aside for him of chicken wings, and that's all he ate. I think it would have been fun to do like a different kind of wing station with different flavors, dry rubs, sauces, that sort of thing. And then I don't know, I can't really think of a third one at the moment, but I think I would have loved for the food to be more representative of our personalities. And I personally like helping, couples plan their weddings. I love when it's things that they love, and it just feels so much more intentional than, okay, we're gonna have this protein and this side. Don't get me wrong, some of those dinners are some of the best catering that I've had that have like that protein and veggies, and truly it's the easiest way to satisfy all of your guests. But I personally just really love the personalization of having, stations or a menu that is unique to you guys and what you guys really love, and kind of just sharing that with your guests. So that's really the fourth thing. Really not all that much that I would change, and I think they're overall like pretty minor things that probably wouldn't have really impacted my happiness or my overall impression of what my wedding was like. So as far as I'm aware, there's really nothing major that went wrong at my wedding, but those were just a few things that I think I would have maybe tweaked a little bit, kind of really stuck to what I wanted and not let others influence my decisions. And I wanted to just share them in case they're things that you're trying to decide on right now or are working through, in case that helps give some insight into someone who has gone through it before and is constantly in the process of helping kind of coach couples through making these decisions on the daily. So I hope this was helpful and insightful for you, and I will see you in a video very soon. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and we'll be sharing more tips on how to plan your wedding and make some of those tough decisions that are always not the easiest to make.